What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of BreBre Talks MMA.
Islam Makhachev versus Alex Volkanovski. This is a fight between two people who both want to go down as the greatest of all time.
All right, guys, it is that time. It is almost UFC 294. So we are less than a week away. It's Wednesday when I'm recording this, so we've only got, a few days until, the biggest pay-per-view of the year, in my opinion. And for several reasons, which we will get into a little bit later. Before we get into UFC 294 and the opponent changes and the huge rematch in the main event, let's recap the Yusuff versus Barboza card real quick and kind of just give my thoughts on that. It was a great card, honestly. I really enjoyed watching it. I'll be honest, I'm kind of getting a little tired of these Apex cards just because I do kind of like having the fans in the crowd. It makes it a little bit more fun, but you know what? I still enjoy watching the fights either way. So I enjoy it, but I do kind of wish they would do a little bit more events, like actual events. So we'll see. I don't know if the UFC is planning on doing that, maybe traveling. And I've talked about this several times before, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but you know, they keep doing these Apex cards, so I got to say something. But anyways, so first fight on the card, women's strawweight, Ashley Yoder versus Emily Ducote. Emily Ducote ended up winning that fight. That was a fun fight. She ended up winning that one via decision. And then we had the next fight for that was Chris Gutierrez versus, I'm going to try to pronounce this, Alay Tingley. I'm so sorry. I don't remember how that name was pronounced. But another great fight. And I've been watching Chris Gutierrez for a long time, since pretty early in his UFC career. And he really stood out to me because he's known for those leg kicks, and he's had, I think, maybe one or two leg kick TKOs. And so I was just really impressed with him right off the bat when I first started him. So it's been really cool to kind of see him make a rise and kind of build more of a following. And honestly, I feel like he's still kind of underrated. So I was glad to see him get the win. Of course, it's always cool to see fighters you've been following for a long time, continue to keep winning. So love to see it. And then the next fight was a women's bantamweight fight. We actually had a couple women's bantamweight fights on this card. And that was Irina Alekseeva versus Melissa Dixon. And Melissa Dixon ended up winning that fight via unanimous decision. And then we had a spectacular performance after that one, guys. We had Terrence McKinney with a 20-second knockout in the first round. That is just incredible. It's what you like to see. It's what you like to see. And I've been a fan of Terrence McKinney since I first saw him fight because he just had something about him. He's got a great story. He's got a lot of personality. He's had some ups and downs in his MMA career, but honestly, I think the future's still really bright for him. I think that this is a really good step in the right direction. It's a huge performance, and it's something that really kind of gets people's attention, not only with him, having his personality, having his whole story, but also now kind of having more of those big performances to kind of get that attention. So it's good to see. He's in the lightweight division, so it is a tough division that he's in. So you expect, not every fighter is going to be undefeated for that long, especially in a division like that. So yeah, I'm excited for Terrence McKinney, honestly. And I was really, really happy to see that. I had a feeling he would win that fight, but honestly, I wasn't expecting it to be that fast. That was a really fast knockout. So super, super impressive. Loved it. And that was against Brandon Marotte. I think it's Marotte. I don't know. Something like that. Sorry, guys. But you know what, though? At least I know how to pronounce Khamzat. I'll just say that. Okay? So go ahead and talk your trash, because I've seen so many people butcher Hamzat's name this week. It's insane. Anyways, the next fight was women's bantamweight again. It was Tainara Lisboa versus Ravena Oliveira, and Lisboa won that fight via unanimous decision. It's good to see women's bantamweight fights. I mean, we haven't really, haven't seen a ton of activity out of bantamweight. You know, obviously Amanda Nunes is gone, so that kind of sucks. But at the same time, it's kind of good for the division, because it's like, oh, now somebody else has a chance to become champion and move up the rankings. So, yeah, I like it. And there's still obviously a ton of talent at bantamweight. And then to close out the prelims, we had Darren Elkins versus TJ Brown. I always love watching Darren Elkins fight. He is an absolute dog. Like, seriously, he is an absolute dog. I've seen him come back from where I thought he was done and then finish the fight. And he finished this one. He got a round 2 submission. So, yeah, he's always fun to watch. If you've never watched Darren Elkins, or if this was like your first time seeing him fight, go back and watch some of his old fights. And there was one fight that he lost that, honestly, I thought he won on the score. Like, the judges gave it to the other guy, but I thought it was clear he won. So yeah, I mean, he's just a dog. So always great to see him win. Always great to just watch him in general. Really, really entertaining fighter. And yeah, I'm excited. A round 2 submission. That's freaking awesome. Against TJ Brown, who's really good too. So yeah, it was a good fight. And then going to the main card, to open up that main card, we had a really exciting fight. Christian Rodriguez versus Cameron Simon. Cameron Simon, he's one of the fighters kind of coming from the whole scene in South Africa, which is really cool to see a lot of those fighters kind of make their rise. And Christian Rodriguez, he ended up winning this fight via unanimous decision, but it was a good fight. I mean, I wasn't 100% sure who was winning the fight, to be honest. I thought Christian had kind of edged it, but you never know what the judges are looking for sometimes. So, yeah, it was kind of crazy. The grappling exchanges were really what stood out to me in that fight. And, you know, Christian attempted some submissions, and I think Cameron even attempted some himself. So it was a really fun grappling fight, stand-up fight. It kind of had a little bit of everything, but the grappling was really what stood out to me on that one. And I thought that Cameron, and he's really young. He's only 22. And I thought he did a really great job defensively in that fight, especially in the grappling. So, yeah, I mean, he lost the fight, but honestly, I think his stock still goes up after that, because he did have a great performance, honestly. And considering how young he is, how early he is in his career, I still think he's got a ton of potential. So he lost the fight, but honestly, I think that that is going to be a good performance for him. It's not like he got ran over. It's not like he got finished. So, yeah, I think his stock went up a little bit. And honestly, he made weight. You know, Rodriguez missed weight by like 4 pounds. So he lost the fight, but he made it a close fight, and he made weight, and his opponent did not. So you got to give it to him for that. And he took the fight, even knowing his opponent was 4 pounds, 5 pounds heavier, whatever it was. So yeah, props to him for not turning on the fight and, you know, making the fight still happen and putting on a great performance. Honestly, I thought they both did great. But yeah, I thought Rodriguez kind of edged it just from his striking. Honestly, I thought his striking looked a little bit sharper. I thought his punches were landing cleaner. He was landing the harder shots. He was landing some really nice knees and elbows. So that I was really impressed with, just the arsenal of different attacks that Rodriguez had available. So that was awesome. Moving on to the next fight on the card. I was really excited for this one. Andre Petroski versus Michel Pereira, which was a very interesting fight, to say the least, because it's definitely a clash of styles. And I kind of said that whenever I was talking about this when they made this fight happen. And honestly, I love Michel Pereira at 185. I think that it was a great move. I think he belongs at 185, honestly. I think he's faster. I just think he was probably cutting an enormous amount of weight to the point where it was actually working against him. And especially when welterweight, honestly, right now, depending on, how you match up stylistically to a lot of the fighters, welterweight is probably the tougher division of the two. So if you're kind of an in-betweener, sometimes it is better to move up, depending on, how tall you are and how rangy you are. And those things matter too. If you're 5'8", maybe moving up to middleweight, probably not the best idea. But for somebody like Michel, who's a big welterweight, it just makes sense. I think Michel Pereira at 185 makes 100% sense. And he proved it. He got a round 1 TKO in a little over a minute against a guy who's got incredible wrestling. I mean, Andre Petroski, he's probably in that division one of the better wrestlers. I mean, obviously we've got Bo Nickel now, so you can't really, I don't know that anybody can really beat him in the wrestling department besides some of these Dagestani guys or a Hamzat. But yeah, I don't know. I think it almost reminded me, this fight, it's crazy because like Michel Pereira's style is very wild. It's very crazy. It's very unpredictable. This fight almost to me mimicked a little bit the Bobby Green versus Grant Dawson fight. Because Grant Dawson, wrestler. Andre Petroski, wrestler. Bobby Green kind of got that wild style. And so does Michel Pereira. And another thing about Michel is that he switches stances a lot too. And so that makes it even more difficult. Because if you're not a striker, dealing with somebody who has good striking is hard enough in itself. But then when you're dealing with a good striker that also switches stances like that, it's not necessarily that they're like that much higher skilled than you. It's just that it throws you off. And, he might, like one thing that I noticed, like the first time I ever sparred with somebody who switched stances, and I didn't even notice they were switching stances until like later on in the rounds. But what I noticed was I kept circling the wrong way. I kept circling toward their power hand because I was used to circling one way against orthodox. And then I was like, why do I keep getting hit so easily? And then I realized it was because I was circling toward their power hand because they were switching stances on me and I didn't realize it. And so I was circling the same way, and then I'm literally moving right into their power hand. So it's little things like that throw you off. And that's just boxing. Like, I've never sparred in MMA or competed in MMA or anything like that. But, and that's just a simple boxing sparring. I mean, imagine throwing kicks and all that kind of stuff into it. It's like, yeah, you're really going to throw somebody off. So I think that's why, guys like Bobby Green and guys like Michel Pereira, Sean Strickland even you could throw in there. Although I think Sean Strickland's probably a little bit more well-rounded. I think that just the fact that they have such a different style, I think that's really what is key to their success, honestly. And when they get matched up with certain guys, it just works. It just works. And there's some cases where it doesn't work a lot of times. But there are a lot of cases where, yeah, it's just hard to prepare for them. If you're not able to beat them in the stand-up, it's like, yeah, you could be a great wrestler, but if you can't get through, a minute or two of the stand-up, then yeah, you're in trouble, because even with that, it's not like you can just take them down right away either, because that style makes it not only difficult to strike with them, but also difficult to get them to the ground. So, and then Michel Pereira, like, he's no slouch on the ground either. So, it was an interesting matchup. Wasn't sure how that was going to go. Honestly, was leaning toward Petroski in that one just because, I thought he's the bigger guy. He's he's been at middleweight. This is a new weight class for Michel Pereira. So, but at the same time, I wasn't really worried about him being undersized because clearly he's not. Clearly he's pretty much meant to be at middleweight, in my opinion. So, yeah, awesome fight. I'm really excited to see what's next for Michel Pereira. I mean, I don't know if I want to see him fight another wrestler or if I'd rather see him fight somebody that's more of a striker. Because there's a lot of fights that are already booked too in the top 15. So it's kind of hard to even find him an opponent right now. So we kind of almost would want to see how some of these fights play out, I think, and then find a new opponent for him. But I think I don't think they're going to like treat him like he's new in the middleweight division. I think they're going to treat him like he's been there for a while because he's been competing at welterweight with top level guys. So he's literally just moving up a weight class, and I think they're going to jump him into some top 15 opponents, I think. But that's just me. But especially after a performance like that, I mean, how can you not? So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they do with him next. Like I said, there's a lot of fights that are already made in the top 15 right now in middleweight, so it's kind of tough. And Sean Strickland's the champion, and Adesanya just lost the belt. It's like there's all kinds of weird stuff going on at middleweight, so I don't know. I don't know what they're gonna do, but I am excited for him because that was awesome. And yeah, just an incredible performance. He looked so fast. It was crazy. And you never know, when they move up, sometimes they get slower. But I think it's because like he already had the mass to begin with, so he didn't have to like put on weight to move up. He just wasn't cutting as much weight moving up. So, but still probably cutting a decent amount of weight, honestly. I mean, he's a big dude. So it's like, yeah, he's huge. But the fact that he is faster in a higher division, like, it just makes me wonder, like, should he have just been in middleweight this whole time? You know? I don't know. But it was a great fight. It was fun. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe eventually we'll get to see him versus somebody like Robert Whittaker or something like that. That might be kind of fun. I would definitely probably take Whittaker in that fight, but it would be fun to see. And you never know. I mean, we thought Whittaker was going to beat Dricus. So, yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting. But yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. And who knows? He might need another fight outside the top 15 first before they really kind of move him in the rankings. But I don't know. Who knows? They've done crazier things. So yeah. And then after that was, Jonathan Martinez versus Adrian Yanez. This was another incredible performance. So Jonathan Martinez, was able to get a round 2 TKO in this fight, and it was spectacular, and it was honestly had a lot to do with his leg kicks that he was throwing. He was throwing a lot of them, and they were landing, and it was very obvious pretty early on that they were affecting Yanez. But he stuck it out, I think, as long as he possibly could. I think he really tried to stay in that fight. But when your leg is completely, like, immobilized, it's pretty hard to continue fighting because, you know, you can, and then unless you can get him to the ground, it's tough. I mean, yeah, there's not a lot of options. You know, you got to either hope to God that maybe they take you down. You know, maybe you can try to bait them into taking you down, or maybe you take them down, but taking somebody down even with a hurt leg is hard. So it's like, gosh, yeah, that's tough. So great game plan by Martinez. I mean, I think that performance earns him a big fight next. And this was a big fight. I mean, Adrian Yanez, although he's coming off a loss to Rob Font, before the Rob Font fight, like, guys, remember, there were a lot of people that thought Adrian was going to win that fight, and he was the favorite. Like, I keep telling people, I'm like, anytime Rob Font is an underdog, like, you kind of have to pick him. You kind of have to pick him. And it's funny because I think he was actually a pretty sizable underdog in that fight. And I remember I told a couple people, I was like, look, I don't really bet on MMA, but if you are ever going to bet on somebody, you need to bet on Rob Font beating Adrian Yanez, because he is a pretty decent sized underdog, and you're not going to see him as an underdog that often, especially in a fight like that, where I thought it was pretty clear that Rob Font was the better guy. And so I was kind of thrown off when I saw the odds. I was like, wow, he's a pretty decent sized underdog. And yeah, and then he just absolutely demolished Adrian Yanez in that fight, and it was super, super impressive. I mean, Rob Font's boxing, I've always said, is probably the best in the division, and it's incredible. So, and he lost to Corey Sandhagen, but honestly, I think he'll be back. So, and I think he's got a fight booked. I can't remember who it's with, but I think he's got a fight booked. So, we'll see him back in there pretty soon. But yeah, that was a spectacular performance. Yeah, I think, honestly, the leg kicks were the biggest thing for me that I noticed. I mean, he's just great stand-up all around. So what's next for him? I don't know. I think I like the idea of him fighting somebody like maybe Jan. I don't know. I mean, there's in that division too, there's a lot of fights that are already booked. So you got to keep that in mind. So I don't know if he's going to get, I don't know how soon he's going to get back in there. I don't know how soon Jan wants to fight again. I don't know if Jan has anything booked. I don't think so. But who knows? I haven't seen anything, but I think that fight makes sense. I don't know. We'll see. We will see. But I like it. I'm excited for him. Maybe he could work his way up in the rankings, make it to that #1 spot, because who knows? Bantamweight's kind of crazy. And yeah, I'm really curious to see Corey Sandhagen's next fight, because I've always thought that Corey Sandhagen could be champ. And I really want to see him versus Sean O'Malley really bad. I just feel like that would be such an epic fight. And in his last fight, he was injured, so obviously it wasn't the most exciting performance, but that's okay. That's okay. He did what he had to do with an injury, so we gotta respect it. But anyways, the co-main event: Jennifer Maia versus Vivian Arroyo. So Arroyo won via unanimous decision, and this was a good fight. Actually, it was a fun fight. But yeah, I thought Vivian won. I didn't think it was super close. I'm trying to remember what even happened in that fight. It's been, what, 4 days since the fights now? Jeez. And you know what? I used to do these like immediately the day after the fights. But what I realized is you miss out on a lot of like MMA news that's important to talk about too. So I would remember everything from the fights, but then all the MMA news would come out after in the press conference and all that stuff. So then I would miss out on all of that. And there's so much more to talk about. So that's why I started doing them on like Tuesdays and Wednesdays instead of on Sundays. But anyways, let's get into the main event. This was a fantastic fight. Honestly, really was expecting this to be a good fight. And I was expecting Barboza to win, and he did. He won unanimous decision, but it was a close fight. It was fight of the night. And it was a banger. And I don't know that I was really expecting it to be like that. I was expecting it to be a little bit more of a dominance from Edson Barboza, or maybe even a finish. But it just shows how tough Sadiq Yusuff is and how talented he is. And honestly, I think both their stock goes up after that fight. I really do. And it was a great fight. So Sadiq not only is a good fighter, but he's also really entertaining, puts on entertaining fights. That's what Dana wants to see. That's what the fans want to see. So it's not always about winning. I mean, it is at the end of the day. Like you want to win the fight. But also, there are some small wins that you can have without winning the fight. Like, you got fight of the night. You know, you put on a great performance. You had some great moments. You know, you exposed maybe some areas of weakness in that fighter. There's things you can do in a fight, even if you lose, that you could still consider like some small wins. So I think Sadiq had some small wins there. I think that he still could end up fighting for a title at some point. I mean, if you get in there and go 5 rounds with Edson Barboza, I think that's a good sign. I think that is a good sign that you are where you need to be. You're in the right place. So, yeah, I don't think it's anything bad for Sadiq at all, honestly. And Edson is so talented that it's just, he's hard to beat. And he's got so much experience. That's the thing. The experience gap between the two is huge. Sadiq doesn't have nearly as much UFC experience or even MMA experience as Edson Barboza has. So it's good to see Edson, though, still winning. I mean, this is insane. Like, he's had, you know, some ups and downs, but for the most part, he's been on fire. And I always love watching him fight. I mean, he's one of the most entertaining fighters. I think he has the most fight of the night bonuses. And he's entertaining. He's so fun to watch. So, yeah, I'm glad I got to see. Every time I even get to see him fight, it feels like a treat just because he's such a legend of the sport. And, yeah, it's hard not to respect him. And, yeah, man, it's always potential to be fight of the night or performance of the night with him. It seems it's either going to be a crazy spinning wheel kick KO or it's going to be a barn burner, you know, stand-up battle. So it was awesome. I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed that fight. And then let's move on. Let's chat a little bit about Logan Paul versus Dillon Danis. This is not MMA, but it is a big deal in the combat sports world, so I am going to talk about it. I did watch the fight, unfortunately. No. I mean, I was impressed with Logan Paul. I thought he did great, but you know, I mean, Dillon Danis didn't do anything. I mean, it was just basically Logan Paul kind of, I don't know, just was the whole show. I mean, Dillon really did nothing. So, I mean, he threw, I could probably count on two hands how many punches he threw. It was disappointing. But what do you expect? What did you guys expect from this? I have a theory, and a lot of you might disagree with this theory, but I don't think it's that far-fetched. I think that whole thing was staged. The whole thing. From the beginning to the end. And from the beginning, I mean from when the fight was even made in the first place. I think that was a huge cash grab. And I think that was the only reason that fight happened, was obviously for money. But it just felt so forced. The trash talk felt very forced. The whole drama of it seemed very, like, dramatic. Like, it just seemed like a lot. And I feel like and I don't know, guys, you might disagree with me on this. I do think that all that drama with Logan Paul's fiance and stuff, I think if you're falling for that, I think you're a little naive, honestly. And that's why I haven't really bid on a lot of that story. And that's why I kind of did take, you know, Logan's side a little bit, because it's like, well, if that really is how you are, then you better back it up when you get in the ring. You better back it up. If you're going to talk like that, you better back it up. I'm sorry. If you get in the ring and you do that after talking all that trash, and then after the fight trying to claim that, you know, it was whatever, it just amazes me, honestly. I think a lot of people got played in that one, and neither of the people that got played were Dillon Danis or Logan Paul. They were the ones playing everybody. Like, you guys think that was real? You guys really think that was real? All that trash talk? I think that whole thing was fabricated. I mean, yeah, obviously everything he was saying was real, and the pictures and all the crazy stuff that he had. But it just almost seemed like, wow, okay, if he was really saying those things and really doing those things, I think Logan Paul would have been a lot more angry. And when they did their little, I don't know if you call it an interview or what you call it, where they were sitting in front of each other at the table, yeah, it just seemed very fake to me. It seemed very fake. I could see right through it. But I don't know. I'm pretty good at reading vibes, so I guess maybe that's why I think that. I think it's very fake. The whole thing. The ending of the fight was so WWE, guys. That was so fake. If you thought that was real, Oh my God. Do I have some things to sell you? Like, the fight was probably real. I do think that Dillon Danis maybe just isn't very good at boxing. Or maybe Logan Paul's better than we thought. I don't know. I did think Logan Paul was going to win, though. I didn't think Dillon Danis was going to win that fight. But I don't know. I'm not buying it, guys. I'm not buying it. First of all, it was an exhibition match, I believe. So it wasn't even, yeah. I do think that the YouTuber boxing and that kind of thing is good for the sport. And honestly, the KSI versus Tommy Fury fight, that fight felt real. That fight felt more, but at the same time, I almost wish they would have done the Dillon Danis Logan Paul fight as the main event, because with that being, it just almost made you not even want to watch the next fight. To be honest with you, I didn't even want to watch it after I saw that. I almost just turned it off. I was like, I don't even want to watch this garbage, because Dillon Danis literally threw like 3 punches and then tried to take Logan Paul down and tried to pull guard in the middle of a boxing fight. I'm like, this is too much. This is too much for me. I can't handle this. And the Tommy Fury KSI fight, I don't know who won that fight. Honestly, I was so frustrated with the way that the Dillon Danis Logan Paul fight played out that I didn't even care. I did not care. I'm glad Tommy Fury won, honestly. Who cares? You know, I think the good thing, though, about that fight is they actually looked like they took it seriously. You can say that. And maybe that's why that was the main event, because it didn't look like Dillon Danis took that fight seriously at all. It looked like he was just trying to collect a paycheck, to me. And because what he can do afterwards is be like, oh, well, you can't beat me in MMA. It's like, okay, well, this isn't MMA. This is boxing. So learn how to box if you're going to take a boxing fight. Like, I don't get it. And that was something that Steiny was talking about, or not Steiny. It was the podcast with, I think it was on Full Send. It was Steiny, Kyle, and Jake Paul. And Kyle, I think, was the one that said, I always forget his last name, but I know his first name's Kyle. He's one of the Full Send guys. And he was saying, like, he thinks it's corny if a fighter, like a YouTube boxer, if they're not taking it seriously. He's like, I really honestly think it's corny. And I agree. I agree, Kyle. I think it is corny. I think it's dumb. Like, it's just an insult to the sport, I think, is really what kind of drives me insane. And I think that's the difference between Logan Paul and Jake Paul. And Logan Paul does take it seriously. Like, that's the thing. But he's also not taking, like, he's not taking it to the level that Jake Paul is taking. Like, Jake Paul is fighting real fighters. He's fighting professional fights that are not exhibition matches. Like, Logan Paul, I think, is more in it for the money. I think Jake Paul truly does love boxing. I think he really is a fighter. Like, he truly, I think he is a fighter at heart. And I hope that he eventually competes in MMA, honestly. I don't know how it's going to go, but I think, I don't know. I hope he does, because I'd love to see it. But I think what Jake Paul is doing for combat sports, I think, is a good thing. I think what Logan Paul is doing might be a bad thing. I think Jake Paul is bringing people to the sport. I think he truly does want to help grow combat sports and bring more eyeballs and attention to it. I think Logan Paul is more in it for himself and for the money. That's just my honest opinion on it. I don't really, like, have a favorite Paul brother, I guess, but if I had to pick one, I would pick Jake Paul, because I do think he does love the sport. I think he's passionate about combat sports, passionate about MMA, and growing the sport and helping fighters get paid more. I think that's really what his goal is. And he just seems like a more genuine person than Logan Paul. Logan Paul, to me, seems very fake in a lot of ways. So I don't know. And Logan Paul's had some scams and stuff. So it's like, can you trust the guy? I don't know. I don't think so. I wouldn't trust him. But yeah, that's my opinion on that circus of an event that happened on Saturday. I don't know if that's good or bad for combat sports. It's good because more people are talking about combat sports, but at the same time, I don't know. The Logan Paul stuff, I'm not there yet. The Jake Paul fights, I like those. But the Logan Paul, it just seems so fake. So fake. Like the Nate Diaz Jake Paul fight, that was a good fight. Like that was a fun fight to watch. It was entertaining. I felt like it was a real fight. Like I didn't feel that Nate Diaz was taking a dive or anything. I mean, he won some rounds. Like he did great in that fight, I thought. They both did. But yeah, I mean, and the thing is, sorry, I need water. My throat is, oh my God. Sorry guys, I'm clumsy. I think, honestly, and I don't know what you guys are going to think about this opinion, but I think what Jake Paul has done with his boxing career is really not that much different than what a lot of boxers do in their career. A lot of boxers, when they start in their career, they're not starting off boxing like elite level boxers. You know, they build up their record. That's how boxing is. It's not the same as MMA. Like MMA, you could fight somebody that's undefeated, you know, and is an absolute monster in MMA your first fight. But boxing, it's a little different. Like they kind of build you up, and the fights are a little bit less. There's not as much anything can happen like there is in MMA. Like, you know, you hear people say it all the time. Anything can happen in MMA. Anything can happen in MMA. Boxing, not so much. Boxing is a completely different animal than MMA. Boxing, I think, relies more on the technical skill of it. And I think relies more on, like, who is actually taking this more seriously. I think that has a lot to do with it, too. So yeah, is what Jake Paul did any different than what a lot of boxers do? I don't think so at all. You know, he's just building up his record, and yeah, he's not fighting people who are professional boxers, but he's fighting professional fighters, which sometimes could be more difficult because you never know what you're going to get. And it's harder to kind of predict what they're going to do because they don't have as much experience in boxing. And you know, they have striking, but their striking was in MMA with smaller gloves, and it's just different. So I don't think that what Jake Paul did is really that much different than what a lot of boxers do when they're building up their career. But that's just my opinion on it. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. But yeah, I don't take this whole thing very seriously with Logan Paul anymore after that. It's really hard to... I think it's going to be hard for him to sell a fight after that, because that was a horrible fight, to be honest. It was a complete blowout. So I think he's got to at least find somebody that's going to take it seriously, you know, and not in it for just all the trash talk and attention. I think that was what Dillon wanted. I think he just wanted the attention and the money. Like, I don't think he cared about the fight. It was pretty clear. But it's Dillon Danis. What do you expect? So, yeah. Anyways. But, to be fair, only one of those guys has won professional fights in their career. And now Dillon Danis has only won, like, 2 fights. And it's been, I think, 5 years since the last time he fought or something like that. But still. At least he does have some professional wins under his belt. Just saying. But it was still a horrible, stupid fight. Sorry, I'm like trash talking this fight. I feel like it's okay to trash talk Logan Paul fights though. Like that's the one thing that we can trash talk, right? Anyways, moving on to the really important stuff, the juicy stuff, guys. This is what I'm so excited to talk about. UFC 294. Oh my God. Okay. So if you haven't watched, if you're new here, if you don't watch my podcast regularly, if you haven't seen my other episodes, I did an episode a couple weeks ago, and I did a UFC 294 deep dive where I broke down all the fights on the card and kind of just gave my thoughts on who I thought was going to win and kind of giving as much information as I could find on the opponents. A lot of them were, you know, Russian or Indian or trying to remember the other country that was in there. There was several different countries that were kind of thrown in there, but and some of them were like newer fighters that just there wasn't a lot of whole lot of information, and I did my predictions way before everybody else did. So just saying, I was working with some limited research, guys. But I feel like I did a pretty dang good job considering the lack of information I had on some of those guys. So, yeah. But if you want to see that, if you want to see my predictions for the whole card, go to that episode. And that's where I did, a whole deep dive. And you can even see my predictions for the original co-main and main event, the Charles Oliveira and Paulo Costa. So, yeah, very interesting change of opponents. I had a feeling that Oliveira might pull out of the fight. I had a feeling Paulo Costa would, but I was really hoping he wouldn't. And then I saw the elbow surgery thing, and I was like, yeah, it's over. Like, there is no way he's going to fight. And, yeah, he is not. Again. I don't know what's going on with that guy. So, yeah, both the Brazilians pulled out, and that's very disappointing. I honestly wasn't shocked, though, at Oliveira pulling out, especially the day before he has to leave for Abu Dhabi. Interesting timing. And I'm not trying to say that Oliveira faked the injury, because the injury was very real, but could he have been a little more careful in sparring? Probably. You know, the day before you're going to leave to go, across the world to fight for the title that you want to get back. Yeah, maybe don't do that, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I am not a world champion fighter, so I'm not going to tell them how to live their life. But I was surprised that he was sparring that hard to where he would get gashed in the face the day before he's going to leave. You know, it's kind of crazy. Or maybe he was just like over preparing. Maybe he was like, oh, I got to train hard because I'm, trying to go win my belt back. Or maybe he felt like he wasn't ready and then he wanted to find some way to get out of it. I don't know. Guys. I don't know. But all I know is back when they originally brought up this fight, this rematch, because they said Islam Makhachev is going to headline a pay-per-view in October. They said this way before this fight was booked. And Oliveira said he was not ready. And then, fast forward to Volkanovski, beats Yair Rodriguez in dominant fashion. And then Charles Oliveira says, oh, I'm ready. Okay. So it just makes you wonder, right? Am I the only one here that's wondering this? I don't know. I think that there's definitely something interesting going on there. But at the same time, if he's not ready, he's not ready. Even if he didn't get injured, it's like, yeah, if you're not ready, it's whatever. I'd rather see Charles Oliveira have a better chance of winning the fight, honestly. I'd rather not see him go into a fight not being prepared, not being ready, or having lingering injuries. Like, I don't want to see that. I want to see Oliveira at his best, because I know Makhachev's going to be at his best. We know that. Makhachev is always going to be at his best. So, yeah, I don't know. But it's an interesting change of opponents for sure. I think that, honestly, I think this is a harder fight for Makhachev, to be honest. Just because, and this is weird, but I think Volkanovski's build and him being short, I think actually is good for him. which normally it's not. Normally people see bigger height, bigger range, and they're like, oh, well, they're going to win the fight. And it's like, no. Well, first of all, Volkanovski has crazy range for his height. He's like 5'6", and I think he has more range than like a longer reach than Makhachev does. And I could be wrong. You might want to look that up first. I'm not going to look it up because I got plenty more stuff to talk about. But I think that, I think he might have longer arms. And he's just, it's sometimes when, especially in grappling situations, sometimes the smaller guy has more success. So I think that his size actually does kind of help him a little bit, honestly. And also it's like, well, Makhachev's not used to fighting guys that are shorter like that. And maybe it just kind of threw him off. I don't know. And so I do think that Islam is going to win. I will say that. That is who I'm leaning toward in this fight. But I do think that this is going to be a harder fight for him. And is he going to be able to finish Volkanovski? I don't know. I mean, we've seen Volkanovski in some positions where it looked like he was going to get finished and he did not. So, I don't know. I think if Islam wins, it might just be a more dominant version of the first fight, which I thought he won the first fight. I thought here's the thing. If the fight was scored overall instead of by rounds, I would give it to Volkanovski, but since it's scored by rounds, I gave it to Makhachev. So you have to look at the scoring criteria before you say it's a robbery or you say this or you say that. Because, yeah, like to me in the 5th round, Volkanovski won the fight, in my opinion, but you don't win the fight that way. You got to win a certain amount of rounds, and that's how it works. Which is unfortunate because I feel like sometimes that kind of scoring system doesn't necessarily give the victory to the right person every time. But at the same time, Makhachev's the one with the belt, right? So you got to beat the champ to take the belt. You can't slide by on a close decision and take the belt. To me, it just feels wrong. It would have felt wrong if Volkanovski would have won that fight. Like, let's be honest. If Volkanovski would have won the fight, there would have been a lot of people who would have been happy about it, but it would have felt a little weird. Like, let's just be honest. It would have felt weird because Makhachev has the belt, and he's been such a dominant champion. And if Volkanovski he didn't beat him. He didn't beat him on the scorecards. And I think that's something that the Dagestan fighters are really, really good at, is knowing how the scoring works and knowing how to win the fight. That doesn't mean that they're going to have a performance that you're going to be like, wow, oh my God, not every time. But they're going to probably win the fight. It seems like they've got it figured out. So I don't know. Another thing that I want to think about is, has Volkanovski been training for Islam this entire time? Or no, has Volkanovski been training for Islam this entire time? You gotta wonder, because he said he wanted this rematch in the press conference after the Yair fight. He's been calling for this rematch pretty much since they fought the first time. So he wanted this fight, and he probably knew in the back of his mind there's a possibility Charles could pull out. So I think in the back of his mind, he knew this could happen, but probably after it got to a certain point, he was probably thinking, okay, Charles probably would have pulled out by now. So I don't think I'm going to fight Islam. Let's focus on Topuria. And it was very interesting timing. Topuria was booked pretty much right before this happened, which is crazy. So Gamrot was selected to be the backup for this fight. And a lot of people, I guess, thought when Charles pulled out that they were just going to go ahead and give the matchup to Gamrot. And it's like, no, that's not quite how it works. The backup is really, in my opinion, there for like a last minute thing. And yes, this is last minute, but it's not last minute to the point where they can't find a replacement. And they can't find a replacement that's actually like deserves the title fight. Like, not that Gamrot doesn't deserve it, because Gamrot's an incredible fighter, but he didn't really, I mean, he won his last fight, but it was an injury, and there's been a couple other instances where he's kind of gotten lucky. So it's like, he's such a good fighter, but to see him fight for the title over Volkanovski or Poirier or Gaethje, it's like, yeah, no. This fight was meant to happen. Volkanovski versus Islam, the rematch, meant to happen. Yeah, if they would have picked Gamrot, that there would have been, people would have been disappointed. And not that Gamrot isn't a big name or anything, but it's like, you got to think from the perspective of a casual fan. And from the perspective of a casual fan, you see Gamrot versus Makhachev, and you're like, what is this? You know, and we know who they are. And I get that. But there's a lot of fans out there that don't know who Gamrot is. They don't. So yeah, it just would have been a very lackluster main event. It probably would have been a great fight, but no. So he's still the backup. If something crazy happens, I don't think anything's going to happen at this point, but you never know. You never know. Weight cutting gets crazy and things happen. You know, you just never know. People get sick. So yeah, I think that was the right move. And I think Dustin Poirier accepted the fight too. But obviously, Volkanovski versus Islam, I mean, yeah. How can you beat that? That is such a great rematch. We need to see it. But yeah, I also was kind of thinking about this, and Volkanovski was talking about this too in the press conference, or the media day. They did a media day early this morning, late last night, whatever you want to call it. And I watched it because I'm a nerd. But yeah, so Volkanovski was talking about how a lot of people are saying he has nothing to lose in this fight. And he's like, no, dude, I have a lot to lose. And I agree with him. I think Volk has a lot to lose in this fight. I think Makhachev has more to lose, but I do think that Volkanovski has a lot to lose. And he made a good point. He's like, well, if I lose this fight, he's like, I'm probably not going to be able to fight for the lightweight title again. And that's a great point. That's a great point, because most likely who's going to be champion is going to be Makhachev for a while, I think. So what is he going to do? You know, sit on the sidelines and wait for somebody else to become champ and keep just destroying everyone at featherweight? Or maybe move up to lightweight and just fight non-title fights? That's another option. But even then, that's a tough division. Especially when you're shorter and, you know, you're not as big as these other guys. It's yeah, I don't know. I don't know how Volkanovski would do against, you know, a Poirier, a Gaethje, or whatever. I think it's just a stylistic thing with Makhachev, honestly. But who knows? I mean, it does kind of bring up an interesting point. How does that go? And you know what I was thinking would be insane? Would be if Makhachev and Volkanovski fight at lightweight, and let's say Volkanovski wins, and then Holloway moves up to lightweight and fights. I don't know. I've been saying I want to see Holloway versus Charles Oliveira rematch at lightweight. I want to see that. I don't know why. I just want to see it because I think it'd be fun. And it would be fun to see Holloway kind of have some new matchups, kind of see him fight some different guys, because he keeps running through everybody at featherweight besides Volkanovski. So I think, honestly, the next logical move for Max Holloway, in my opinion, would either be if they did an interim title fight between him and Topuria, or for him to move up to lightweight. And I think we'll figure all that out probably in January. But for now, I'm just thinking, like, depending on how things play out, I think it would be really cool to see Volkanovski versus Holloway at lightweight for the lightweight title. I think that's the only way you could justify a fourth fight between those two. I think any other scenario, you can't do it at featherweight again, in my opinion. But if Volkanovski has the lightweight belt, I wouldn't be mad about it. I wouldn't be mad about them rematching at lightweight. I think that would be very interesting. And Max Holloway, he cuts a lot of weight. So, like you see him during the weigh-ins, he always kind of looks a little depleted. So, I don't know. It's interesting. But, yeah, I do think, but getting back to what I was saying, I do think that Volkanovski does have a lot to lose. You know, he's got his legacy, which he cares a lot about, which is good. I'm glad he does, because I think it's important. I think legacy, when you get to that top level, when you become champion, I think thinking about your legacy overall is important. And it just shows you the kind of person that he is, too, and his mindset. But the one thing that I will say to that is Volkanovski, he has something to lose, but he also does still have that built-in excuse. And he's probably not the type of guy to use that excuse. Like, and I can see him after the fight, if he loses, being like, oh, well, you know, I took it on 12 days notice. It's like, okay, that's fair. But he does still have that excuse. Whether he uses it or not, he has it. You know, he has a built-in excuse that he can use, and it's perfectly acceptable for him to use that excuse because, yeah, he did take the fight on 12 days notice. So, yeah. And he was saying, too, you know, would Islam do the same thing? Would Islam take the fight on 12 days notice? No. Because, first of all, Islam wouldn't be able to make weight on 12 days notice, guys. So that's kind of a silly question. And he even said if this fight was at featherweight, he wouldn't do it because he wouldn't be able to make weight at featherweight. Well, duh. He was 180 pounds when he got the call for this fight. Well, that's what they say. That's what they say, at least. That's crazy if that's true. That's crazy. I didn't realize he walked around that heavy. Oh, my God. Wow. Maybe he should just be at lightweight permanently. That's what I want to see. Even if he loses this fight, maybe he goes back down to fight Topuria. But after that, I want to see him, if he beats Topuria, I want to see him just stay a lightweight. I like him a lightweight. It's just fun. Because I don't think anybody at featherweight's going to be able to beat him. I don't even think Topuria is going to be able to beat him. So I think Topuria could potentially beat Holloway. But we say that every time. And then nobody ever beats him. So I don't know. I don't know about that either. But I do think that Volkanovski at lightweight is very interesting. And I think, yeah. Does Islam Makhachev take that fight on short notice? No, but it's really just because of the weight, in my opinion. But you got to think about that too, like all the travel on top of taking the fight on short notice, traveling. Yeah. And that's another thing too to think about with the first fight. The first fight was in Australia. So Volkanovski was on his home turf. He had, you know, his crowd there and did really well in that fight. And Makhachev didn't look as good as we thought he was going to look in that fight. And I wonder how much of that has to do with him just being so far away from home, having all that travel. Khabib wasn't there. He wasn't in his corner. There's a lot of things working against him there. And Khabib was even saying, it was right after the fight, they were on FaceTime. Khabib was on FaceTime with Makhachev, and he said, you know, you had 10 less hours to rehydrate or whatever he said, or I don't know. And they had the whole thing with the IV, and I never really got to the bottom of that or figured out what happened with the IV, but I guess it's fine because nothing's really been done about it. So it's like, okay, I guess we're good. But he did say that. He's like, oh, well, you know, you didn't have 10 extra hours to kind of, you know, you were depleted. That's what he said. He's like, you were depleted. And Makhachev cuts a lot of weight. And clearly Volkanovski does too. But yeah, I don't know. I think that might have had a lot to do with it, with his performance. I think we're going to see a better performance out of Makhachev this time around. I really do. I really do. And I'm actually glad the Charles fight got canceled because I think that rematch needs to be in Brazil. I think that rematch needs to be in Brazil. And it's only fair. It's only fair. Like, this is perfect. The first fight was in Australia. The second fight's in Abu Dhabi. Perfecto. We got it. So then if they do a trilogy, you know, they could do it anywhere. But I don't know. I don't know what to think. And then here's the other thing. If Volkanovski wins, they have to do a trilogy. And if he loses in a way that's like similar to the first fight, they still might do a trilogy. It just might not be as soon. Because they did one for Max Holloway. So sorry to yawn. So it's like, what happens then? Let's say Volkanovski wins. If Volkanovski wins, then they do the trilogy. They'll probably do the trilogy either March, April of 2024 or September, October of 2024. I would assume that's when they would do the trilogy for that. But then what happens at featherweight? Depending on when Makhachev would want to rematch, Volkanovski could still fight Topuria in January and still fight for that title. And then rematch Islam after that? I don't know. It seems crazy, but I don't know. It seems like he's got his career kind of figured out. And that's one thing I really admire about Volkanovski is he's really planning his career. Like, you can tell by the way that he talks, like he's thought this through so many times, and he's thought through like, okay, this fight and this title and this belt, and I want to have, this fight after this one. He's on it. He knows what he wants to do and what he wants to accomplish. And he's doing whatever it takes to get there, taking a fight on 12 days notice. I mean, because think about it, how soon would he have been able to fight Makhachev, if at all? Because if Charles won the fight versus Makhachev, the second fight, the rematch option for Volkanovski is kind of off the table because they have to do a trilogy with Oliveira over Volkanovski rematch. So he might have been waiting around for a long time. So he pretty much had to take this fight on short notice. He had to. Otherwise, he was risking never getting this rematch again. So I think it's really admirable what Volkanovski's doing with his career. I think this is a fight. Islam Makhachev versus Alex Volkanovski. This is a fight between two people who both want to go down as the greatest of all time. Do you guys realize that? Both of these guys, they are not just fighting for a title. They are not just fighting for a belt. They are fighting for their entire legacy. Because potentially, if Volkanovski beats Makhachev, especially if he beats him dominantly, you could put him in the GOAT conversation now if he does that, in my opinion. I'm not saying he's number one or even number three, but he's in the conversation. He's in the top 5, top 10. I mean, shoot, I'd probably put him in my top 10 right now. I mean, look what he's done. It's incredible what he's been able to accomplish. So you look at that, and then you think, okay, well, if Volkanovski can win this fight and pull this off, if he can get one more win at lightweight, defend the title one time, I think he's arguably the greatest of all time. I know that sounds crazy, but look at his resume. Look at it. Look at what he has done. And tell me that you can't get on board with that. If he wins the fight, wins the rematch, or wins the trilogy, so if he wins the second fight, then wins the trilogy, and then if he defends the title one time, you're telling me he's not the greatest of all time? Guys, I think he's the GOAT if he does that. Forget about the featherweight GOAT. I don't think he cares about being the featherweight GOAT. I think he just wants to be the GOAT, guys. He's like, Aldo can have that title. I just want to be the greatest of all time in general. I want to get 2 belts, and I want to just completely dominate both divisions at the same time. It's just nuts what he's trying to accomplish. It's crazy. And same thing with Makhachev. Makhachev wants to get 2 belts too, just different divisions. He wants to go for that welterweight title. And depending on who wins Leon versus Covington, if Covington wins that fight, I think that's a great matchup for Makhachev, honestly. I think that is the perfect fight for him. Perfect fight, because he can beat him in the stand-up. And what is Colby going to do with the wrestling? I mean, Islam's got great wrestling too. So what, it's just an interesting fight. I think it goes similar to the Usman fights. Maybe even a more dominant win from Makhachev. But, you got to realize that Makhachev's not a welterweight. He's not as big as Usman, but he's still pretty big for lightweight. So I love that fight. I love that idea. I don't necessarily know what would happen in a Leon Edwards situation. I do think Makhachev would still be able to win that fight, maybe with grappling. But I don't know. I'm sure he could put together a game plan for that. But I do like the Colby Covington fight better. I think that's a better matchup for Makhachev, honestly. But yeah, so they're both trying to do pretty much the same thing, just in different divisions. And so the only thing standing in each other's way is Volkanovski and Islam. So what are they going to do? They're going to fight for it. They are fighting to determine who is the greatest of all time, in my opinion. And they might not be the greatest of all time after this fight, but they're in the right direction. And if Islam can win this fight, so let's look at Islam's career. If Islam Makhachev can beat Volkanovski again and hopefully beat him in a more dominant way, if he can do that, then I would think he will probably move up to welterweight and fight the winner of Colby versus Leon. If he wins that fight, hard to argue against greatest of all time for him too. Honestly. Or at least in the top 5. At least top 5 in my opinion, because Khabib never got 2 belts. That was one thing that he really didn't do. Even though he probably could have. He probably could have. Looking back at it now, it's like, wow, he could have. He could have done it. And I would have loved to see it. And who knows, maybe one day it'll happen. Probably not, but you never know in this sport. But Makhachev, if he can win the welterweight belt, because think about it too. Like, I know John Jones has the 2 belts and Daniel Cormier, but they're not the same as winning the belts in those 2 divisions, in lightweight, like even featherweight too. Like winning the belt in featherweight, lightweight, welterweight. Gosh. Getting 2 belts in those divisions. I mean, Conor did it, but he never defended the title. So I would like to see, if Islam did move up to welterweight, I would like to see him defend the title before really throwing him that GOAT status. But, oh my God. Yeah, he would be in the conversation for sure if he won both belts. And then also, if he defended the title once or twice, I think he arguably could be the greatest of all time. If he can do it. That's a tall order. That is a tall order, even for somebody as good as Islam Makhachev. That is a very tall order. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But I think there's a good argument for either one of those guys after maybe 3-4 fights, title fights. GOAT conversation is absolutely there. And I think both of them, after this fight, whoever wins is probably creeping up on the top 10 of all time, in my opinion. So we'll see. I mean, definitely Volkanovski. I would think Volkanovski winning this one just because of the dual belts, and with him still being featherweight, like simultaneously being champion, like that is so hard to do. That is so hard to do. So yeah, I think we'll see what happens, but I think that this is a fight to determine who's moving toward the direction of greatest of all time. Because eventually John Jones is going to fall off of that title. And he's held that GOAT status for so long. Although, before there was a lot of controversy with it, and I kind of really wasn't even on board with calling John Jones a GOAT. I was more like, oh, maybe GSP. And in my opinion, GSP really is still, to me, kind of the GOAT. I don't know. I just love GSP so much. I think he's just such a complete fighter, and the level of competition that he was facing, like, oh my God, that people don't understand. The toughest opponents were in front of GSP. And yes, if you look at John Jones' resume, very, very difficult opponents. But towards the end there, we had the Dominic Reyes fight. Dominic Reyes, not really the highest quality opponent when you look at some others on his resume. The Thiago fight, like, there's just a lot to it. And then there's the the controversy, the legal stuff, which the legal stuff, it's kind of more of a separate thing in my opinion, but I don't know. It's just tough. But with him winning the heavyweight belt, I think that kind of squashed all of that in my opinion. And now he's definitely the GOAT. But I think I wouldn't be surprised if either Islam Makhachev or Volkanovski steals that GOAT status from him within the next couple years. Honestly, I would not be shocked at all. So we'll see. We will see. And I thought, of all people, I thought that either Khabib or Adesanya were going to steal that GOAT status from Jon Jones, and neither of them did. So hopefully one of these guys can do it. I don't know. I would love to see it. But yeah, I'm hoping that this is still a competitive fight like the first one, but I just don't know. I think it's going to be more dominant from Islam. But who knows? I mean, Volkanovski taking this on short notice is hard for him, but it's also hard for Islam. And let's not forget that, because Islam has been preparing for a submission artist. He's not been preparing for Volkanovski, which to me is like the featherweight version of GSP. He's a guy that he can beat you anywhere. And I think that's what's so dangerous about him. He's just so good everywhere, and his fight IQ is incredible. And I think it's just he's smart. I think that, we have so many conversations about wrestling's the best space for MMA, jiu-jitsu is the best space for MMA. What about intelligence? Have we ever thought about that? Have we ever considered that maybe the best base for MMA is just being really intelligent? I mean, look at all the best fighters. GSP, extremely intelligent. Jon Jones, although has, had a partying thing, still a very intelligent guy. And you can tell by the way they speak, by the way they carry themselves. They are so smart. And not only that, but they're a professional athlete. There's some guys that they're a professional fighter, but they don't necessarily fit the bill for professional athlete, where they're just super athletic, which was another thing about GSP that made him so good. He was so athletic, and so is Volkanovski, and so is Islam Makhachev, and so is Khabib. These guys are professionals. They are pros. And I honestly think it's the only reason why Volkanovski was able to take this fight on 12 days notice, because he's a freaking professional. He's already cut, I don't know how many pounds. He's down to 167 or something like that. The last time I heard, he's probably way below that now. But yeah, he started at 180. So I don't know. I just think that there is a certain thing to be said about a fighter's just overall intelligence, just as a human being. And their work ethic, not only on the physical side, but the mental side too. And there's a lot of mental work that goes into fighting. You've got to study your opponent. You got to study your game plan and strategy. And there's so much more to it than just fighting, is what I'm saying. And I think that when you look at the elite, the top level of champions, you see a common theme. They're usually great on the mic. They're usually, and not always, and some of them maybe don't speak English, so sometimes that might be the barrier there. But for the most part, usually great on the mic, usually great at promoting themselves, usually carry themselves really well, usually have a ton of confidence, belief in themselves, and very, very intelligent and very smart. So, and look at everybody that's champion right now, and look at their intelligence level. And even Sean Strickland. And Sean Strickland is such a tricky guy, because Sean Strickland, he says things that are really outlandish and kind of off the wall, but he's smart. You can tell when you listen to him talk, he is very intelligent, and he may not have the formal education and background to make himself seem that way, but he's way smarter than we think. And I think Sean O'Malley is another example. He's a pothead, and has all the crazy things with his hair and all this stuff, so he makes it seem like he's not smart, but super intelligent guy. And Tim Welch, oh my god, probably one of the smartest coaches in the game, and just incredible. So yeah, is intelligence and self-belief and confidence and all these things, is that the best base for MMA? I don't know, it might be. And then all those other things are just oh, yeah, well, yeah, I'm a fighter, so of course I'm going to be good at striking. Of course I'm going to be good at wrestling. Of course I'm going to have good takedown defense. I'm a fighter. You know, those are just things that they think are necessary, which they are. And then what really sets them apart is their mindset, their strategy, their thinking, the way they think. Like, Volkanovski's thinking like 5 to 10 moves ahead all the time. And I've never seen a fighter have the ability, like Volkanovski, to think far ahead and plan his career out, but stay in the moment at the same time. That's something that just so brilliant about Volkanovski that he does so well, is he's able to focus on the task at hand, focus on what he's doing right now, but at the same time, he's still plotting his next moves, and he's thinking, okay, if I win this fight, then I go here, and then I go here. Because it's like, yeah, well, he's already visualizing himself winning the fight. He's already seeing himself in that moment, winning the fight. So he's thinking, okay, what am I going to do next? But he's not looking past his opponent necessarily. I think he does a brilliant job at that, of being very focused on now, but also focused on the future at the same time. Because we see fighters all the time. They're like, oh, I'm going to be champion. And it's like, you're on the prelims, dude. And it's like, it's kind of hard for us to get on board with you right now because we don't know. But people like Volkanovski, he probably knew all along he was going to be champ. But he's not the type of guy that's going to go around being like, oh, well, you guys suck. I'm going to be champ. You'll see. You'll see. Like, he's not the type of guy to really do that. He's the type of guy to say it in his head, or maybe say it to the gym, you know, say it to his teammates, but not necessarily to go boasting around. Like, and I think that's a good strategy to have. I think it's good to be like that. And another thing I admire about Volkanovski is I think he has better fight IQ than Makhachev, honestly. I think he has probably, besides, I don't know, I would say John Jones just because of the past John Jones, but recent John Jones, I don't know. I don't know who has the better fight IQ. Honestly, Volkanovski might have the best fight IQ in the UFC right now. I think he's brilliant. And I think one thing he does really well, and I've talked about this before, is his ability to try to finish fights, but still win on the scorecards at the same time. And I know he didn't win on the scorecards against Makhachev, obviously. But to me, yeah, won the fight. He won the fight. Didn't win the rounds, but won the fight, if you know what I'm saying. So I think that Islam Makhachev, obviously, I'm leaning toward as the favorite. But Volkanovski, man, I would love to see him win because I just admire him so much for what he's done with his career and just how intelligent and just brilliant he is at just creating, you know, his career and mapping this out to what he's done is incredible. It really is. So, and he didn't do it like Conor did it. He didn't do it by talking a bunch of trash. He did it by earning it. He worked for it. He worked for that lightweight title. The lightweight title fight, not the title, which, I don't know, maybe he'll get it this Saturday. But he worked for that. He didn't talk for it. And I feel like Conor, while he did work for it, did more talking for it than anything. And so I think that's what sets Volkanovski apart from Conor. And maybe he's not going to get as big of paychecks as Conor, but his legacy will be much stronger, in my opinion. I think he is way more well-respected than Conor, and I'm not really trying to compare the two, but honestly, if you look at it, they kind of did similar things. I mean, Conor was at featherweight, moved up to lightweight, had both belts, so they're doing very similar things. But Volkanovski, to me, is just a more respectable fighter. I think he's... his work ethic is out of this world. I don't know that I've seen a work ethic like that. He's a very active champion too. And yeah, what he's trying to do is crazy and I love it. So I don't know. We'll see. Is this fight going to stay standing? I don't know. I think Islam's going to want to keep it standing. I think his best chance of winning this fight is on the feet. Honestly think so. But at the same time, with him being so depleted in the last fight, I'm wondering if maybe that's why his wrestling wasn't quite... Because you heard Volkanovski say, oh, he's not that strong, And it's like, well, you know, maybe he's just depleted. So maybe we see a stronger, more dominant grappling version of Makhachev this time around. But I honestly still think that on the feet is where he will probably have the most success. I think that's where he had the most success in the first fight. So I would think that he would want to keep this on the feet if he wants to have the best chance of securing the victory. Or kind of what I said in my prediction with Charles Oliveira and Makhachev is get him to the fence and, ground and pound him. But I don't know. It's going to be tough. I don't think he's going to be able to submit Volkanovski. Volkanovski is not easy to submit at all. We saw with Brian Ortega, but also it's kind of like he doesn't really have much of a neck. And I feel like that's something too that people don't really think about is with submissions. It's like that kind of does play a factor. And I think that Makhachev's best chance of beating Volkanovski is pretty similar to what I said with Oliveira, just in different ways. I think his best chance is probably ground and pound TKO, which I think he would have to probably like press him against the fence and just go to town in order to kind of make that happen. Or get in the very middle of the octagon. But even then, Volkanovski's scrambles are so good and his wrestling is so good that I think he'd be able to reverse and be able to get back up. So I don't know how effective that strategy would be. I think pressing him against the fence and getting him in like a stacked guard, kind of like what I said with Oliveira, I think that might be his best chance. Or with him trying to just finish him on the feet or point fight him on the feet. I think either strategy would work. I think another thing to think about is Volkanovski's leg kicks are underrated. Maybe that's something that he implements a little bit more into this time just to kind of try to nullify the wrestling and the striking of Makhachev. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. But I'm still going to go with Makhachev, leaning toward him slightly. But let's talk about the co-main. So we got a new co-main. We got Khamzat Chimaev versus Kamaru Usman, the former welterweight champion, dominant welterweight champion. I don't know what I think about this fight, honestly. I think I'm still going to go with Khamzat on this one. And I think, it's just... One thing I do love about this fight is I love that Usman is moving up because I've always wanted to see him move up to 185. I think he cuts way too much weight to get down to welterweight at his age. I think when he was doing it in his prime, it was okay, but you've kind of started to see the injuries are wearing on him, his knees, all the wrestling. I mean, wrestling is so hard on your body, so much harder on your body than striking. So I do think that we're going to see a different version of Usman, but ultimately I think he's going to have a tough time with Khamzat and Khamzat's pressure and his pace and just especially with it being at welterweight. I don't know, but at the same time, Gilbert Burns gave Khamzat a hard time. So I don't know, but with this being, kind of a home turf fight for Khamzat a little bit, it's in Abu Dhabi. I think that's definitely more of his comfort zone being there. I don't know. I think I'm still going to go with Khamzat on that one. I think Usman's best chance at winning that fight is honestly probably in the stand-up department. I don't think the wrestling is there for Usman anymore. I don't think his wrestling is what it used to be, really mainly because he's so worn down. I mean, think of how many title fights he's been in, how many 5-round fights he's been in. I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but I am curious to see how not having to cut that much weight is going to affect him, because I think that is going to give him a little bit of an advantage. But still, I do see him being good defensively with the grappling, but at the same time, Khamzat's pressure is just something, it's different. And he doesn't necessarily pose the same risks that Gilbert Burns did on the ground. Gilbert Burns can submit you anywhere. Gilbert Burns might be one of the most underrated BJJ practitioners in MMA, in all of MMA. I mean, he can submit people that are heavyweights. Like, Gilbert Burns is a different breed when it comes to the grappling. So Usman, I don't think, poses as much of a threat. Now, Usman does have a really good submission game, and he does have really good wrestling. but I don't know that that is going to really give Khamzat as much to worry about as Gilbert Burns gave him to worry about, which is why maybe that fight played out the way it did. So I think that ultimately Khamzat will probably dominate this fight. Or maybe it'll be a close decision. Who knows? But I would probably lean toward Khamzat dominating the fight. I don't know that he'll finish it. I don't know that he will finish Usman. With Usman not cutting as much weight, I think his chin will hold up better. I think that's a good thing. I don't think he's going to get finished nearly as easily as he did with Leon. But yeah, I think I'm going to go with Khamzat on that one. I'm going to go with Khamzat either by decision or maybe a TKO. And if he gets a TKO or a KO, I think it'll be probably in the first or second round. And if he doesn't get the KO in the first or second round, I think honestly, but I don't know. I mean, Leon, what was that? The fifth round? Was it the fourth or fifth round when, that might have been the fifth round when he knocked him out with that head kick. And Usman was kind of dominating that fight. So I don't know. Maybe if it does go later, then who knows? But that's another thing too. Like, that was a perfect head kick, and Leon's striking, I think, is more technical than Khamzat. Khamzat just has incredible power and pressure and aggressiveness, which is, I think, what gives him a lot of success. So we'll see. I don't know, but I'm sticking with Khamzat. So I'm really excited for this fight. We got UFC 294 Saturday, Islam Makhachev versus Alex Volkanovski, the rematch. So excited to see this fight. I've been begging for this fight ever since really the first fight. I was like, yeah, we got to see that again. And then also on Friday, just so you guys know, BKFC has a huge main event. It's Keith Richardson versus Reggie Barnett for the BKFC Bantamweight title. And if you don't know who Keith Richardson is, I had him on my other podcast. I interviewed him. Fantastic interview. Amazing human being. Just an impressive guy. If you have a chance to watch that interview, if you go to my other channel, bre.eckert on YouTube, or if you just search Keith Richardson, the BreBre Pod, you should be able to find it. But Keith Richardson is not only a bare knuckle boxer, which he's undefeated in bare knuckle boxing, by the way. He's not only a bare knuckle boxer, but he's also a former MMA fighter, and really wasn't an MMA fighter that long ago. So he's still in a 4-fight win streak in MMA, and his last MMA fight was, I think, a little over a year ago. So he's not that far removed from MMA. And before that, he was in the Marines. So he's a Marine veteran. So this guy is just, to me, incredibly underrated. He was able to build a record of 22-11 in MMA. He's got wins over Damon Blackshear. He's got like, his resume is crazy. He's been in there with Patchy Mix. So to me, that is the most underrated fight that I feel like not enough people are talking about right now. Is BKFC Keith Richardson versus Reggie Barnett. You have to watch it. It's going to be incredible. And the co-main event is going to be incredible too. Tony Soto versus Kevin Kroom. And you might have seen Tim Elliott is sponsoring Tony Soto because Kevin Kroom is the guy that I guess his ex cheated on him with or whatever. I don't know the whole drama behind that. It was crazy, but yeah, so pretty petty sponsorship, is kind of funny. But Tony Soto, I mean, he's undefeated in bare knuckle too, and he, I think he trains with Keith Richardson, or maybe they live in the same area or something. I don't know. I feel like I've seen them training together or something. But yeah, super impressive fighter as well. And Kevin Kroom, former UFC guy. So it'll be really interesting to see. I feel like this is a super underrated event that's going on. So if you don't know, now you know. I sound like Dana White right now. But seriously, check it out. BKFC is always entertaining to watch. I will be breaking down those fights next week on next week's show. And I honestly believe that Keith Richardson is going to steal that belt. I really do. I just think he's got an unbreakable mindset. He's got incredible work. I've never seen anybody with the work ethic like he has. I mean, it is absolutely insane. He runs his own gym, so he owns his own gym. He teaches classes. He teaches adult classes, kids classes. He teaches fighters. You know, he's coaching, and he's fighting himself. It's crazy what he's able to do. And I've seen he's been staying busy doing interviews and all kinds of stuff. So he's just a dog. He's an absolute dog, and it's hard not to respect him. It really is. So I'm really excited to see him fight, and I'm really excited for that whole event in general. I think it's going to be awesome. It's in South Carolina, so it's kind of right in his backyard. But yeah, so Friday night, BKFC, Keith Richardson is fighting for the title. You definitely don't want to miss that one. But yeah, and then UFC 294, in case you didn't hear me say it earlier, early start time if you're in United States. I personally am in the Midwest, so for me, early prelims start at 9 a.m. So I'll be up with my coffee watching the fights. I don't know about you guys, but yeah, I'll be drinking some caffeine for sure. But yeah, it's gonna be fun. I'm excited. I love daytime fights, actually. I think I like daytime fights better than evening fights because I pay attention better and I'm not exhausted by the time the fights start. So I'm actually kind of excited for it. A lot of people don't like it, but I like it. I don't know why. I just like it. But anyways, that's all I got for you guys today. I'm really, really excited for this weekend. It's going to be a great weekend for combat sports fans. Oh my gosh. BKFC title fight on Friday and then UFC 294 Saturday. You could not ask for a better weekend of fights. So excited. And thank you guys for all the support. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you listening or watching today or however you consume this. And I will see you guys again next week. Bye.